Welcome everybody. My name is Kyle Groves. I'm an EIT with CAD Technology Center, and today's presentation is what's in your toolbox, understanding the Toolbox tab of the Civil 3D Toolspace palette. So, why are we here? What's the problem? Well, we go through this process. We create our design. We've got our alignments and our profiles and our surfaces. Maybe we've got corridors. Maybe we've got Kogo points, and they're in our drawing, and there are some ways to report on them, but they're not that great. So what do we want? We want detailed reports on our design. We want these to make sure that they've got our company name on it, that they've got our clients looking right, all our headers are in a row, and we also want some extra design tools that we might not be able to find in the ribbon. Well, our solution for that is the Toolbox tab in Toolspace. Civil 3D comes downloaded with a lot of pre-configured reports. They're installed out of the box, and there is some customization that can be done for your project and for your firm. There's also supplementary design tools that are installed with new year versions of Civil 3D, as well as updates. I do want to mention that that's going to be a secondary focus. We're going to focus mostly on the reports today. So what are we going to be talking about today? We're going to be talking about the layout of the toolbox. For those of you that weren't aware, this is one of the buttons up in our Palettes tab on the Home ribbon. It shows up in the rest of our tool space, just like Settings, Survey, and Prospector. We're going to talk a lot about the reports. For some reason, there's reports in multiple sections of the toolbox, but we'll deal with that in a bit. We'll touch briefly on some of the miscellaneous utilities. These are extra commands that we have access to. And then I'm going to mention that the design tools exist. We're not really going to check any of those out for today, but they're found at the bottom portion of the Toolbox tab. And then we're going to show you how to do some light customization inside Civil 3D with those buttons in the Toolspace palette, and then some very simple XML edits. I'm not going to teach you how to do XML coding today, but I'm going to show you where we can find the information that we want to change. And then I've got an XML editor. It's called Notepad++. It's free. It looks great. It's what we here at CTC use. So let's get into this. What are we going to talk about with our reports? Well, it's important to note that we have different ways that these reports are output and different ways that they're input. For our output formats, we've got either files that are going to come out in a CSV or an ASCII format, or we'll have the option of selecting from HTML, Word, Excel, text, or PDF. Generally speaking, those are all going to look the same. It's just a function of what program you want to open them in and distribute them with. When we're creating our reports inside Civil 3D, we're going to be able to do it one of two ways. We're going to do it through a land XML report, which is kind of the granddaddy of all of this, and if you're paying attention to the dates modified on all files and things like that, a lot of this information's been around for a while, and XML is pretty universal. Then we've got a few other commands that will give us a Civil 3D dialog box. So we'll be able to choose a little bit more narrowly which data we're interested in. And the other great thing about this is all of these give us a bit more detail before we create the report about what we might need and what this is going to look like. So I'm just going to put up on here, I'm going to pick out one report from each of the sections in the report manager. We're going to talk about it a little bit. I might go faster through some than others. For those of you that are watching this on a post-record, feel free to take a pause here, check these out. I am going to say not all tools work for all companies, and I am not saying that every report has to use one of these. These are just some of the ones that I've seen, some of the ones that I've heard of, and to give you a feel for how to create these and how to look at them after they're created. So with that, let's hop into the software. It's important to note that when I'm creating these tools and these reports inside Civil 3D, all of my design is done. I could certainly do this midway through my design if I needed to check anything, but these like to have a lot of Civil 3D objects. And for example, Let's go ahead and open our toolbox actually here. So that's up in the Home tab in our Palettes panel, and then now we'll see it down here. We're going to look at the Reports Manager to start. So these are all of the out-of-the-box reports that are given with the software. So for example, as I was saying, we might have an alignment report. Well, I would have alignments for that, but this actually needs a COGO point in order to run effectively. Some of our corridor reports, even though we're using a corridor object, well, those are based off of alignments and profiles, and some of those are also going to ask for data from sample lines. So that's why we want to be using these reports at the tail end of our project. So with that, I'm just going to go through and I'm going to create a couple of reports. We'll start out with the alignment curve, and this is just going to give us a basic one. And this is one of our land XML format creations. So again, land XML, it's used for talking in between Civil 3D drawings. It can also be read by other software, other design software, as well as some data collectors out in the field for stuff like surveying. So with this, I could just narrowly deselect and only grab, say, my alignment data. But if I get this all, it's going to create the XML file for my whole project, and everything that it might need, it will have access to. I have a chance to save this. I can choose whatever format I have available. So if you see HTML, there's a few that are only HTML, but generally you're going to be able to go with all the rest of these types of reports. So if I were to hit save, it would generate the report. It's just gonna take a little extra time that we don't need to spend. But I would get this report, you can specify its name, and when it's in an HTML format, it's gonna use either Edge or IE, depending on which version of Microsoft you're using, to display this report. Notice that the company name and stuff like that, it's not filled out. I'll show us later in the presentation how we can make this look more the way that we want, as well as some of this information inside the report itself. But here it's giving me, for all of the alignments that I had selected in my XML, it's giving me data about the tangents and some of the curves. I've got length of the tangent, I've got a bearing being reported, and all of this stuff. I can go on, I can print this as a PDF, I can send this out to the printer, but I now have a report that I can use to submit to my regulatory agency. I can give this to my field staff, or I can look through it myself if this is the way that I prefer to verify my designs, or my project manager likes to verify their designs. I also mentioned that sometimes we can only get an HTML report for this. So when I run general legal description for alignments, I'm just right-clicking on these and running the execute. This one's kind of goofy, but this is going to produce a dynamic HTML page right here on my computer. So I'll have an opportunity to select one or all of my alignments, modify some descriptions, but then here is the text, and this is just being automatically generated based off of a predetermined file inside Civil 3D. So when I'm at a certain point, I'm going to go thence along a tangent line. And it's going to grab a Civil 3D value, and it's going to say a distance of, this is what we call strings, these are character strings, so this is just going to be the same every time. And then when it's reading data from the software, that's what's called a field. So it's just going through, it's running this. In this case, we would need to either print this or save this. Also, too, this one gets automatically thrown into your user temp folder. So you'd have to navigate there. If you wanted to keep it in HTML format, you'd have to navigate to your user folder, copy it out, and then paste that into your your project destination for all of your reports. Next up, for our corridors, we've got the slope stake report. When I execute this one, this gives me an opportunity. This is what that Civil 3D dialog format looks like. So it's giving me a description. It says I'm going to get cross-sectional and slope break data along my links within the selected corridor in tabular format. So select your corridor, your alignment, And then this is one that needs a sample line group. The material list is optional. You could choose that to be none. And then for the links, I actually didn't see a difference. There could be one, I didn't notice it when I was preparing for this, between just adding any old link and adding all of your links of interest. But when I verify what corridor and links I'm going, it's going to populate my stations. I can modify that if I want, but I do want to make sure that I'm specifying where, the name, and the format of the report that I'm looking for. So when that gets done in HTML format, here's what we get. We get a nice little pictogram. This is giving me all of my corridor points. So I'd spec these out in my corridor subassemblies. And then for each one of those points, like my sidewalk in, I'm being given an offset value, an absolute elevation for that point, and then a slope away from my center line. And then for, say, my curb, I'm getting a slope for the actual value here in my curb slope. So this will go through and it will give us at every station along our corridor. So this first one is at station 125. Got my cut, fill, net cut, fill, 150, so on and so forth, on down the line. Is this terribly useful as a design aid? Maybe, maybe not. But if I'm a field guy or gal and I'm out doing an inspection and I need to verify my cross slope or my elevations at a particular critical station, this is going to be an opportunity for me to have easy access to say, hey, I'm at 275. I have to have my flange, at 825.4, okay, 200ths, that's probably fine. But I have instantly an entire report that I can just go and check off. Maybe it's in paper, maybe it's in a PDF editor, but you'll have that information available. Next up, we've got our parcels. So the one that I chose to show off for here is the parcel volume report. And this one's kind of cool because if you're doing a subdivision and you want to know on a specific lot, what's your cut, what's your fill, you'll need a volume surface. You can specify which parcels you want to include in the report, and then a cut or fill factor. And what you get out is a nice little report saying, hey, for parcel 7, that's the only one that had this volume surface in it, I have 8.5 yards of fill, I have 200 yards of cut, so I am cut heavy by 210 yards on this particular lot. So again, there's all kinds. Please check these out, look through them yourselves, see how you like them. I'm just going through and I'm grabbing one from each. The pipes, structures, and pipes and structures are all pretty similar. They're just going to report to you your pipe size, station, offset, stuff like that. But the structures in CSV file is actually a really great report because this is super handy for our construction staking. And I will run this one straight from the software. And here we go. We've got the structure name and network, the type, the size, the material. But here we go right away. We get our northing, easting, rim elevation, and sump elevation, and our sump depth. It's going to tell us what pipes are connected to it. So is all of this information necessary for my staking? Maybe not, but now that it's in Excel, I can quickly cut out my columns, reorganize, resort, and then I can export this to a format that my survey data collector can use. So that one I will say is a report that is pretty handy and that a lot of people are going to find useful. So definitely don't forget about that one. Our points, pretty simple, points in CSV. That's just like our export points function, point list, radial stakeout. But I am very excited to have found this station offset to points. When I create a Kogo point table, I don't have the option to specify a reference alignment to be stationed and offset by. I can create points with those station offset, but I can't table them afterwards. Nor with a alignment table can I create and add in my points for there. So this is a really great way to tie that information together. So one of those Civil 3s, I did not figure out how to sort this, so when we get this out into our Excel format, you could then cut and sort it, but it's going to look a little something like this. It's just going to give us our point, station offset, elevation, and then the description. So now I've got that information tied together. For our profile, again, a lot of them, the one we're going to look at is the PVI, or the profile station and curve, PVI, station and recurve rather. So choose a list of profiles. Well, I don't want all of these, I just want my mainline profile. Create the report. And the nice thing about this is when I'm designing, I can spec out where my PVI is supposed to be, but it can be tough for me to find exactly where my PVC and my PVT are. I've got elevations, grade ins, grade out, K value, curve length, all this stuff. So here's an easy report that I can just pass off to my regulator or to the rest of my design team, and they can check it out and confirm for themselves that it's what is supposed to be there. Surface points to CSV, this is going to give you a list of all of your tin points. So where all of your triangulation is happening, that's that. And then the surface report, that's XML. This is going to give you a quick rundown of all of the surfaces in your drawing. So area, min-max elevation, tin points, tin triangles, and then if you have any volume surfaces, you'll also get your net cut, net fill, and your net total between those, tell you which of your surfaces are your base and comparison. Note, this is not the same as going to our volumes dashboard and creating a report. Notice how this doesn't have any of that fancy header information that I have, like myself, my client, the company that I work for. This is simply a quick HTML, XML report being created. And the Breakline reports, I'm actually going into my survey file for this because these really like to have an open, read-only is fine, but an open survey database, survey figures that live in this drawing, or it'll check the surfaces in your drawing. The weird thing about this report is it's actually going to give you a report of survey figures or whatever objects that are outside of the range specified here in the bottom. So if I say maximum length, maximum delta, so on and so forth, so when I ran my report, I said anything over 120 or under 815, that's what I want to see my report on. So what we'll get out is this list that says, hey, here's the break line, northing and easting elevation data, and then why is it in the report? Well, this elevation was too high. This break line was too short. This break line had too much grade change in between it. So this is the kind of info that's going to come out from that. And that's an overview of some of the reports inside the manager. Again, those are not all going to be applicable for every organization. I'm not even arguing that those are the best ones. I never used the Toolbox when I was working for consultants before I came to CTC. Some of these I picked up from clients, and some of these I said, hey, I think that looks pretty cool. So give these a try, check them out. Next up, I'm just going to fly through these. I'm not even really going to talk about them inside the software too much, but it is important to note that the other things in our toolbox, we've got those miscellaneous utilities. Of note, I think, are the Parcel Properties Manager. Lets us change our parcel object styles, as well as our parcel object labels in bulk. So that's pretty handy. Then we can create a quick cross-section using across the surface with that quick cross-section tool. And then we get additional Civil 3D content inside our toolbox. So the rail turnouts and crossings, that's bigger and better in 19 than it was in 18. But this changes from year to year, and it changes with our updates. And so to kind of show you that, I'm in 2019 right now. Let's pop back into 2016 and see what this toolbox looked like. I've got an entry for every productivity pack that came out. So packs 1, 2, and 3, those all had info in it. And productivity pack 2 was the first time that we were allowed to extract corridor feature lines. Well, in 2019, I mean, that's just part of our corridor contextual ribbon. If I could only select it. I'll cheat. Hey, feature lines from corridor. So a lot of new tools, a lot of new content will first make its way into our toolbox, and then later on it may get added or it may get dropped. For example, there's a function in Civil 3D 16, the coordinate geometry editor. It is completely undocumented in 2018 and 2019. The only way to access that command is to type it into the command line, and you can't even search it in the help. It'll run, but apparently Autodesk just doesn't want us using that anymore. So at this point, I'm going to kind of close off the section where we're talking about the user aspect of this, and I want to spend some time talking about how our CAD management team or our savvy power users are going to leverage this to make it a little bit more friendly for our projects and for our user base. So with our report customization, we're going to talk about three main things. We're going to talk about editing our report settings. We're going to talk about editing the toolbox content, so what's actually showing up when we open Civil 3D. And I'm not going to show you all of the steps, but just some tips for distributing to our users. The stuff lives on the C drive, and it lives really deep and really buried in hidden folders like program data and your user's app data folder. So whatever your enterprise setup is, if you guys have a network profile, or what CTC has been recommending for a few years now, is having a local setup. So basically what this means is there is a master computer somewhere that has all the settings on it. It'll push those files up to the server, and then the server will download those all automatically onto everybody's user computer so that everything's on the C drive. The advantage of this is if I'm in the office, on an airplane, at the job site, or at my house, I don't even need an internet connection, and my Civil 3D experience is going to be exactly the same as if I was sitting in my chair at the office. So no more missing plot styles, no more missing line styles, and there's only one setup for the CAD management team to manage. So if you do have a enterprise level CUI, it's my understanding with all of the stuff that I've done the research on this, that has to live on the C drive in those buried locations. So let's move on and talk about how we can modify our report settings. So inside Civil 3D, with our Toolspace and our Toolbox, that's going to be the button on the left. And here is the location. You can type this in as you see it. So this %username %, that can go directly into a Windows script, and that means I'm on a computer, I'm the current active user, I might not know who that is or what that name is, but just fill that in for me and keep looking. So what does this modify inside our files? Well, this is our report settings. So when I was running the alignment and curve report, when I first do this, I don't do anything else to my settings. I get all this default language. Well, that's not what I want. I want my language to be, hey, we're CTC. This is our address. Here's the client. Here's who made this report. That's what these edit report settings do. So I can come in, the client, that's the people we're doing the work for. The owner, that's us. So I prepared this, Kyle Groves, EIT. I'm working for CTC, and as much or as little of this information as you wish. And then from there, we can set the defaults for our reports. So for alignments, what's our unit? Are we feet or meters? What's the precision for any of our decimal places? And we can go on and we can set that for all this information. Now, if I'm a one-man shop or a one-woman shop, or I know that nobody else is going to use this stuff, I can do this in Civil 3D. I can just go on and set this up, and next time I boot my software up, it's going to remember all that. But as soon as I got to go start doing this with other people, I have to either go to their computer and manually recreate all these settings, or I could take the XML file that controls all of this information, and I can copy and paste it into their area. So this is the XML editing portion of the day. So I've gone ahead and I've navigated to that location. Users, app data, local, so on and so forth. And it's the gen settings file that is controlling all of this. So notice how this was edited at, well, a minute ago. That's because I just had it open inside Civil 3D. When I open this, I want to open it with either Notepad regular or some other version of an XML editor. I already mentioned that CTC uses Notepad++. Our development team is really fond of this program. They've got other stuff for their .NET editing and so on. But when it says, who's the client contact, well, that value's already been populated by the engineer. And if it's looking for the owner who made this, well, I did. So some of this information can be pre-populated and pre-filled out. So you might want to leave that blank for your enterprise level one, at least right away when this writes out to people. So you're going to fill in your project information and so on and so forth. But you can also modify the values for what you want these prompts to be. So the setting pair name, I can change that. I can change that to be, or the address one, doesn't have to be address one, that can be address first line, whatever, doesn't matter. So this is the file that I'd have to copy and paste out. I can modify it in Civil 3D, or if I'm really good and really confident with my XML coding, I can do it right here. The other aspect of this is not just our report settings, but it's about what is actually in our toolbox. So I have an alignment curve report, I have a station and curve report, but if I want an entirely new tool, an entirely new report to run, well, that is by right-clicking on one of these subcategories and adding a new tool. And how these work is when I've got my tool for the alignment curve, I've got the name, this is how it's going to show up, and then I've got the tool type. I have to pick my executable file. Generally, these user ones are going to be .NET, VBA, or XLS, which is an XML style sheet. So we have to specify the type, and then we have to specify the location for this actual file that's going to write. And pardon me, I went ahead. So that's the button we're going to use in Toolspace. We have to link up the tool to the executable. Here is our file path. This is on C program data. So we're looking at a configuration XML for our toolbox. That's the master that says how many file trees are in here, what are the commands, what tools are they pathed up to. And then we also have to take a slightly branched approach and go into our report types. So here's that ENU data folder. This toolbox will take me to my configuration XML. That's going to mirror what's going on in Civil 3D. And then this reports folder is where my actual executables live. So I've got these categorized into .NET, VBA, and XSL. And when I say I there, I mean the software. And we'll do just some real light editing here. I'm going to open this with Notepad. If I wanted to change the title or the way that this is being reported, I'm going to change the string values. So that's horizontal alignment station and curve report. And what I'm really interested in is I didn't want to see course in my report title, I want to see bearing. So that's that's the new version. Here's the old version. When I go into that XML file, XSL rather, I can find course. I know this is where I'm at because I'm right next to my length and some other stuff, but I've found that value. So if I go through and I find course, I can replace that with bearing. And if I hit replace all, everything that was in this XML file is going to switch. And I save this. So that when I run the report, my tables are now going to say bearing everywhere they used to say course. So you can go through, and here's that version 2. So you can go through and you can make those kinds of light edits to just get this to look a little bit the way you want. Obviously, if someone in the office is great with XML coding, they can do a lot more. They can create their own custom reports or change substantially these templates that are given to us out of the box. So lastly, again, if we're going to distribute these to users, we've got to do a Windows script copy into our local files. If you want more information on this, there's a Civil 3D help article called How Do I Migrate Custom Files? It's got the Toolbox stuff in there with these files, with these file paths. So that's all I've got for the discussion today. In conclusion, the Toolbox gives us reports on our design that are otherwise unavailable in the software. We can use these to give regulators, to ourselves, or to our field staff for easy verification in the field. It also gives us extra tools with new versions and with new updates within those versions of Civil 3D. And lastly, the Toolbox can be customized not only on a per-user basis, but this can also be distributed across the organization. So with that said, I want to thank everybody for watching.